Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the mornings. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday once again. It's October 6th. I have to squint and make sure I got it right. October 6th, 2025. Time to do this all over again. A full week ahead of us. No interruptions, I don't think, for major holidays this week. And everything appears to be working out just fine. So good. All the systems are go. It took a little prodding to get the computer systems moving today, but I started earlier. And so things are looking up and appear to be working just fine. The rest of the country, not so much. Constitution, whatever. I don't know. We have a new governing document. It turns out very much to be the case that the guerrilla channel was always real, but not only is it real, it's our actual system of governance now. They essentially keep Donald Trump pumped full of whatever is bruising the back of his hand every couple of weeks, and then sit him down in a room and show him select videos and tell him this is the way it is out in the country and out in the world, and wouldn't it be great if he did the following things? I don't care, whatever it is, just get me some lunch, and I've been pressing the Diet Coke button for an hour now. All right, well, we'll get you something to drink, and you sign these papers, and we'll take care of the rest. Apparently, his media diet in some serious question, up to now and including the use of AI deepfake video. We actually made some mention of that at the end of last week. It was becoming apparent that he was circulating some AI-generated video of his own, some of which he eventually took down. Word is he may be being shown that video as well. We did hear a week or two ago that he was being shown old video, that he had basically come to the conclusion that what was happening in Portland, Oregon, war-ravaged Portland, Oregon, was, in fact, well, what he was being shown was footage from 2020 protests following the murder, as it's official now, of George Floyd, and some of the more raucous protest there and then, but being re-aired, at least in front of him, and being told that this is exactly what was happening, but not only, of course, just on this one block in Portland, which was the case even then, really. But that this was happening again now, and that, as usual, it's very easy to convince that entire cities have burned to the ground, or at least he loves to say so, and it's not entirely clear every time how much of it he really believes, but the point is that he's saying it while in his president suit, and that makes other people believe it too. Now he's back to Portland being burned down to the ground. I guess it has never occurred to him that Portland burned to the ground in 2020 and was rebuilt, which and has to have been rebuilt in order for it to have burned to the ground again. Now, and it would never occur to him, of course, to realize that, well, even if that were the case, that would mean that Portland were rebuilt entirely under the Biden administration. And what a great infrastructure project that would have been. Unfortunately, every time there's a Trump in office, they burn all of these things to the ground again. Anyway, if you've seen any of the video from on the ground in Portland, well, if you've seen it from anywhere but that one block, you would have seen, oh, like, that's life as normal. People are getting ice cream, going out, walking around, doing their shopping, doing all the normal things, parking, driving, sitting in traffic, whatever it may be. But if you are seeing video from that one block where the ice facility is, you might have seen 10 to 12 people standing outside saying, this is rotten and you should stop it. Or people dressed up in inflatable frog costumes, for instance, standing in front of the police. And the police backing away. Very odd. So, I don't know. There's a variety of protest techniques going on, but there's no burning of anything to the ground or halfway to the ground. Unless, of course, you're talking about the beachfront homes of South Carolina state judges who happened to have crossed the Trump administration. That was the case over the weekend, where one of the local judges who was handling the case in which the federal government was demanding that the state hand over all of the personally identifying information that goes along with their voter files so that they could, search for fraud, which of course isn't happening. Well, the judge that stood in the way found her home burned to the ground over the weekend, and while she was out, she was thankfully out of the house at the time, but the rest of her family was not, and they're hospitalized. And the video that's available, this house is engulfed in flames. I don't know how long this thing took, but it seems plain that there's a good reason that you should be, and not just the fact that this judge had crossed the administration and had been receiving death threats as well, although that is a daily part of routine for judges everywhere. That unfortunately is the case. But this fire swept through this house so quickly and so thoroughly, it's worth a look at whether or not this was arson, and reportedly that's the aim of investigators. It's way too soon to jump to any conclusions, but I know that tensions are high, and it may eventually even support that conclusion. But yeah, the truth is, right now we have a fire, some people who are hurt and need help recovering, and I mean they had to jump from upper decks, I think, of this beach home and have broken bones as a result, including her 80-year-old husband, a former state senator himself, and possibly kids and grandkids involved as well. So we'll still have to wait and see what happens there. But I don't know, it's dark times. It's a lot of weird things. There are some less dark things. Some other things of interest to share. Of course, Greg Dworkin is on hand. Let me see if I can make this work, because I got sort of just this morning mailed a batch of fun fanfares from Scott, but I haven't had a chance to edit them together. But this one seems like thrilling in a way. Let's see what we got here. Ooh, it's loud too. Very regal.
Well, that'd be okay if it ever stops.
Right. It's about 15 seconds to get to the end of this thing. It's nice. It's more than usually asked for. And it plays twice, no matter what you do.
Yeah. So first 3 bars, and then you can stop.
Yeah. We'll try that. Just a rehearsal here.
I mean, you hear this and you think to yourself, okay, this is the alternate to Imperial Margarine, but how long is that one? And that's how long this one should be.
Yes, I can't believe this is margarine, and I can't believe that you haven't just stopped this music yet, because, it's margarine. What are you doing? We only have 30 seconds for this commercial. When can I tell people the name of the margarine? We're done.
Yeah, butter would have melted. What's with the margarine here?
Right. All right. Well, good morning, Greg. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
How is the major construction project?
Well, I sent you some pictures, which you should hold up to the microphone. So
there you go, everybody. Look at this.
The shower tile is in, and some of the accoutrements, like one of them is here, like the toilet handle.
Oh.
But the important parts, the shower arm, the faucet for the vanity, they're still on back order. So it's going to take another week, I think.
Tariffs, probably.
But it's really coming along well. I've really gotten to know a lot of the construction folks. They're really nice people.
Sure.
They work well together. They figure out problems and overcome them. It's exactly the kind of people you want working on elections.
Oh. Well, if you're free, folks, they would welcome your help in trying to make the elections work as well as this construction is going. All right. That is there, you should have you built in any space for classified documents in this bathroom?
Yeah, there's a hidden chamber behind the shower. Excellent. So I could, keep all the stuff I'm not supposed to have.
Yeah, that's a step ahead of the other guy. Hidden chamber. Yeah, he should have thought of that.
The problem is figuring out how to access it without spilling the soap, but these things happen.
Okay.
So since you brought it up, I'm going to change the order in which I was in my head thinking about this. Don't think that all of this is planned out in advance, folks, because it's not. David and I figure out what we're doing about 15 seconds before we get on the air.
Right.
But
you hear me trying to hit the right button all the time.
This is Talking Points Memo.
All right.
Judge hands down second emergency ruling protecting Portland from National Guard occupation. The
Yeah,
Trump
we're gonna have to get
appointed
to
judge
this.
reprimanded DOJ for circumventing her order. So she had said, look,
This is
there's
really
nothing
weird.
going on in Portlandia here.
Right.
And so, like, you can't really do this. And Trump said, okay, we're doing it anyway. And then last night she said, no, you don't understand. You're circumventing my ruling. I said you can't. I meant you can't. You can't.
Yeah.
So as of now, the way
Sort
TPM
of
puts it,
weird. Yeah.
a federal judge handed down a ruling from the bench Sunday night to shield Portland from additional National Guard deployments, which he said was the move of an administration circumventing her earlier order.
Yeah, it was.
How could bringing in federalized National Guard from California not be in direct contravention of the temporary restraining order I issued yesterday? She wrote.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is, of course, a judge probably appointed by a hugely corrupt person, though.
Right. Now, this is interesting because I didn't quite figure out why Gavin Newsom was joining the suit against the Oregon situation.
You wouldn't
believe it. And the answer
is
because they're trying to use California troops. That's why.
Yes. They originally were going to try to, I think the first suit was, we are going to force Oregon National Guard to become nationalized so that I can command them to do what I want in Portland. Oregon sued. The judge, a Trump appointee, said, no, cannot do it. And by the way, along the way said, you're saying this is because there's an emergency in Portland and there isn't one. You're not getting, I don't know whether you're not getting good information or you're just lying, but I won't say that, but I will say you're wrong about what's happening there. Then Stephen Miller, the weekend president, said,
he's only the president on days that end in Y.
Right. And they said, well, here, we'll twist the knife. Why don't we federalize some California National Guard and use them instead? And that's when this judge said, you're not hearing me.
Right.
You can't
Which is important because it isn't just Oregon.
Yeah.
In Chicago, Pritzker says that Trump is trying to use Texas National Guard to circumvent Pritzker's suit.
Right.
So he's going to red states to steal their military to invade blue states. Let's just be clear about what's going on here.
Yes, it's important to put it that way. They're the part of the reason why it's supposed to be so difficult and why judges have grounds to say no is because it's extraordinarily dangerous and kind of maybe civil war to do that. So they try and make it difficult. But yeah, Texas there's slightly different facts on the ground, and judges, good judges even, may end up in different places on these two cases because it's one thing to say, I want to steal your National Guard to invade one of your cities. Another thing to say, I want to steal your National Guard to invade someone else's cities. And then yet another thing to say, will you give me voluntarily your National Guard to invade someone else's cities? Those are three different situations. But two of them are no's so far. The third might also end up being a no, but not yet.
So the judge in this particular case, Karen Immergut.
Yeah, that's my best guess at the name.
Justice Putnam mentions that it isn't just a Trump appointee, but a Bush U.S. attorney and part of Ken Starr's team.
Oh, yeah, that's true, too. Also, by the way, serving currently on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. So this is somebody who's been chosen from among the members of the federal bench by John Roberts as, a skilled and level-headed judge.
Right. Meanwhile, and this is covered by David Schuster over at Blue Amp, a federal judge dismantles Trump's tyranny with a spine of steel and 161 pages of ruling. Federal judge William Young shreds Trump. I think this is a Reagan appointee.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember offhand, but different judge, though.
In a searing 161-page opinion, Massachusetts-based U.S. District Judge William Young, an appointee of President Reagan, provided a masterclass in how bad faith anti-constitutional arguments should be treated. Judge Young ruled that the foreign students enjoy the same free speech protections under the Constitution's First Amendment as American citizens do, but it's the language. Young had the temerity to begin his opinion by displaying a threatening message he received via a postcard from an anonymous MAGA maniac.
I forgot about that
Trump
part.
has pardons in tanks. What do you have? Said the postcard.
Yeah.
So the judge wrote that Trump cabinet secretaries, including Rubio and Noam, State and Homeland Security, deliberately and with purposeful forethought did so concert their actions and those of their two departments intentionally to chill the rights to freedom of speech and peaceably to assemble. The president's palpable misunderstanding that the government simply cannot seek retribution for speech he disdains poses a great threat to Americans' freedom of speech. And then he went on to say about ICE.
Yes.
This court has listened carefully to the reasons given by Ozturk's captors for masking up and has heard the same reasons advanced by the defendant Todd Lyons, acting director of ICE. It rejects his testimony as disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. ICE goes masked for a single reason, to terrorize Americans into quiescence. Small wonder ICE often seems to need our respected military to guard them. Can you imagine a masked Marine? It's a matter of honor, and honor still matters. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So some strident language being employed, so people like Stephen Miller love to ignore strident language, and in some cases they can get away with it. But yeah, Republican appointees, longtime senior judges, all getting rather fed up with a broad array of administration behavior. So,
yeah. As in, look, if you misunderstood what I was saying, let me just be clear in very clear language.
The judge in the Oregon case also, by the way, sat over the weekend to do this stuff and to issue her orders, but also when they tried to circumvent her, ordered a hearing for 10 p.m. Sunday night. Like, look, I'm going to do this tonight. I'm going to sit down and tell you can't do this.
Right.
So that was pretty serious. And in the middle of a government shutdown, which that's another of the dangers too. At some point, the government shutdown sort of is a slow rolling situation. There are certainly places that have their own funding pools that they can draw on temporarily, like in the courts in particular. But at some point, if the shutdown continues to drag on for a number of weeks, that pool of money begins to run out, and you do run into a situation. It may be something that Trump is hoping to exploit. Let's keep this shutdown going long enough that the courts that stop me can no longer sit. And that was something Marcy's been warning about for a long time. Yeah. Well, that's always an issue, right? And then you find out that there are some judges like this one.
We're meeting weekends and evenings to keep up. No problem.
And they do not enjoy that, and that comes through in their rulings very frequently, too. What am I doing here at 10 p.m. Sunday night? This is bad.
You're making me do this the night before the first Monday in October.
Yeah, right. That's true. Look what you made me do. And it's the first Monday of October. Yeah, now the Supreme Court enters its new term. I wasn't even necessarily going to go there, but it's a good point. And all I'll say is all the things that were on the emergency docket, like the 27 cases that they had to step in on an emergency basis in the last 8 months or whatever, now they're supposed to hear the merits argument of some of those things.
Not just that, they're not only right-wing nut jobs, but if you actually take on the case and supposedly hear the merits, you also have to write down what your thinking is, which in the emergency docket you don't have to.
Right, that's true. I think we may find that there's a new tradition of maybe I don't have to write anything now either. But I mean,
the emergency docket is usually, look, Trump can do what he wants because whoever's complaining doesn't have standing.
Yeah.
That's normally what they do. Or we're granting Trump the right to continue the illegality until we actually get to rule on it, which isn't necessarily that we're going to rule that he can do it.
Yeah,
it buys him time so that we can see how this plays out. Oh, it's playing out poorly in public opinion. Maybe we'll rule in the country's favor.
They got that trick available to them. By the way, you mentioned the standard thing. I just will quickly mention that in that Oregon case, in front of that judge who's very annoyed by all this, the government stood there and said, Oregon doesn't have standing to sue us to stop us from stealing their National Guard and using it against their population. The judge was kind of like, that's kind of funny. Like, you went to law school and learned about what standing was and everything, and you're still
No,
here saying
no, Judge,
that?
you misunderstand. Oregon doesn't have standing because we're using California troops.
Yeah, well, they did that. They said California doesn't have standing to sue. Oregon doesn't
California
have
doesn't have
standing
standing because this is Oregon, and Oregon doesn't have standing because these are California troops.
Basically,
so all of you should go
right.
home and leave us alone.
Who has
And
standing?
the judge said, you know what?
First
No.
base. Yeah, right. Okay. So it's, the judges are catching
listen,
on.
I'm not a lawyer, but I know bullshit when I hear it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's hard not to see it.
It's probably because I'm not a lawyer that I
Maybe.
recognize bullshit when I see it.
All right. Well,
But,
yeah.
Another breaking news thing I just should do before we get to a regular order part of our show is that France's new prime minister, who's been there for a day, resigned.
Oh, well,
He named a new government.
That's
Everybody hated it, so he's out.
Well, I'm glad in the age of the internet you can do that in a day now.
Yeah, just
10
And
p.m.
also,
Paris time,
they
someday.
agreed for peace in the Middle East, except they're not there yet.
Right.
Trump has decided that Hamas has agreed to his proposal, except they didn't exactly. They said yes with changes.
Right.
And
They may lack
Netanyahu
standing.
agreed to the proposal, except with changes, which pissed off everybody else who thought it was a different deal. And so they're getting together with optimism, but no deal yet because it's the Middle East, and the devil's always in the details.
Yeah, and it's very difficult now. I every time I'm reading, well, the sides have agreed, says the Trump administration, and I say, well, okay, that could just be them saying.
The only salient point here, I think, is to just keep in mind that if Netanyahu makes any kind of deal that looks anything like what this looks like, his right-wing government will collapse.
Yeah, and then he probably goes to jail.
So it's hard to imagine him.
Yeah. I think if I were him.
He said he agrees, but that's not the same thing as putting it on paper.
Do you agree?
Or as you often point out, you have to put it on paper and deliver it to the proper authorities for it to be an actual thing.
That's true. Very true. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not certain how it works in the Israeli system, but I can tell you, first of all, you need to write it in the opposite direction. And then, I don't know, do people need the paper? Does it have to be parchment? Is it a scroll?
Right, but this isn't Chipperoy posturing. The right-wing parts of Netanyahu's right-wing coalition, which is to say the ultra-right-wing people, actually will walk if they don't get complete destruction in Gaza.
Yes, they're intent on that. They're not entirely dedicated to like the rule of law or having a government. They might
care
not
less
care.
about hostages.
Right.
They could care less about anybody else.
So
it's unclear. So we'll have to watch that. It's a, as they say in the news, a developing story.
Yeah. It would be great to call an end to this, and that's all you can say at this point. Sure, it would be. Is anybody going to do it?
Meanwhile,
I don't know.
She got tired of waiting, so Jane Goodall died.
Well, she's
I was
been
waiting
around a
for
while.
peace in the Middle East, so I was going to try to live forever, but it's not coming. So
I'm getting tired
of this.
I'll die. Yeah. All right. Well, that was news over the weekend too. Was 90 plus years old.
Very famous,
tremendous life well
woman.
lived.
Revolutionized our view of things like, for example, the ability of non-humans to use tools. Just to mention one of the many, many things that she did. But she was a humanist in the best sense of the word. And she left, which Netflix played, she left a message to be played on the occasion of her death. She did not want this played until she died. Oh. And many of the news outlets covered part of that message, which is to say here on coexisting on the planet with other species, we have to be mindful that they're not merely tools and that they're part of the ecology and part of the planet, and we have to learn to get along with it. It was a beautiful message.
Okay.
But that's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm doing the show.
All right, right.
I'm doing the show because of the first part of her message, which for the most part, network media refused to play.
So this is from March 2025, and all right, it's going to take a little while, 3 minutes. I think I don't know.
I just want to do the first 42 seconds.
Oh, okay, well, good, because...
Do you have people that you don't like?
Absolutely, there are people I don't like. And I would like to put them on one of Musk's spaceships and send them all off to the planet he's sure he's going to discover.
Would he be one of them?
Oh, absolutely. He'd be the host. And you can imagine who I'd put on that spaceship.
Who?
Along with Musk would be Trump,
Ooh.
and some of Trump's real supporters. And then I would put Putin in there, and I would put President Xi. I'd certainly put Netanyahu in there, and his far-right government. Put them all on that spaceship and send them off. In the place where I am now,
You can stop.
I look back.
Oh, this is her posthumous messaging. Okay.
In the place where I am now, that's what they played.
Oh, I see. The good.
And going forward. They left out the beginning. The first question.
Well, that seems important and like it was maybe central to her messaging, but good. So Netflix played this whole thing. How long is this? The whole interview must be show length, I guess, but
I don't know.
Or maybe it's just a short feature. That's cool.
It says source famous last words.
Yeah.
Netflix. Maybe they have a whole show about famous last words.
Maybe. I don't know. Netflix is still a confusing entity to me. But okay, when I get served the show, okay, I can watch that. Looking for things, I'm confused. But that's interesting.
I thought that was notable.
Yeah,
I certainly echo her sentiments, not just in the place where I am now part, which is beautiful.
Yeah,
but I also echo her sentiments about the first part that nobody played that you should hear.
Right.
I mean, the Daily Kos contributor to
the whole
Pundit Roundup who pointed this video out to me.
Okay. Well, yes. Thanks. That's interesting. Interesting also that it got cut out. That's the situation we're in. Of course, everybody has got mergers to consider, but I guess Netflix
I'm not
doesn't.
Totally surprised. I mean, it is very political, and if they decided not to, I'm not totally on their case about this.
No, I think.
But let's be clear about what cancel culture is. Cancel culture is I don't want you to say stuff I don't like.
Yeah. Or I don't want you to say anything that could cost me money. Right.
Or merger.
Right. Which is the same thing. But okay, well, that's as strong a message as you can get. So in March, she knew she was doing a last. By the way, how do you like to get the call?
When you get to be 90-something, you can make a pretty good guess that soon enough it's going to be your last whatever.
Well, she was correct about that. But by the way, who fields the call from Last Words from Netflix? Wait a second. No. Prank call. Click.
David, I'd like you to give us your last. Wait, what? What do you know that I don't know?
Right.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The new show, Last Words by David Waldman. I'm recording this well ahead of time, I hope. I mean, unless somebody knows something. It's a difficult call to take, but as it turns out, so I have a note from production crew behind the scenes. This one's Mom. Hi, Mom. Who says, I guess this is the first time that they've had footage like this. It's basically, they said, we got this footage, let's do a show and we'll call it this. And I don't know whether they have any plans to interview people they think are going to die and, put it in storage or what. But considering what's on streaming services these days and all of the various cable channels, I could see that being pitched and green-lighted.
They probably
have
a chyron at the bottom of the show that says, we really don't want to call you. Please call us.
Yeah.
Because it's awkward if we call you.
Right. Well, it must be. But all right. Yeah, I assume. I don't know whether they can really plan a show going forward. But if they don't come up with another one, there's another escape mechanism.
Right. But I tell you, just to help them out, Could you ask
limited
your
series.
mom whether she
Yes.
could think of a polite way to ask for one of these messages? Because I can't.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Everyone can brainstorm on
Moms
that
are
one.
good at this.
But what would you like to say to everyone at your 99th birthday? Well, this is my 97th birthday. I know. I'm saying, when the landmark time comes, maybe dupe them into that, but then they get aware because they're like, well, you know what? This seems like a bad bet.
Right.
In case I'm not here, let me just tell you this. And by the way, although I would do this every day, I think they should launch Donald Trump into another planet.
But
that doesn't mean I think I'm going to die.
I mean,
I just think that.
The name of the show is Famous Last Words, but don't get the wrong impression. That's not why I'm called.
That's true. And again, I do find very frequently, you come up with an idea, you pitch it, you get it produced, and Netflix is very excited about it being a series, and then you can't come up with anything else.
Well, not
and
just
so you
that.
say it's a limited series.
It's a limited series.
It's a very short
if we
movie.
call you, I just want you to know, first of all, there's a non-disclosure agreement, so you can't tell anybody what you said until we broadcast it.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you are not permitted to say anything else to make sure that these are actually your last words.
I know.
I don't care how long you live
since
after
March.
we did the filming, but you can't say anything.
Yeah. Well, she knows sign language, so, maybe she didn't say anything.
Maybe. So I want to talk about Trump's unpopularity, and that's important in regard to the shutdown showdown.
Yes. And by the way, Netflix, I have a suggestion for your next show, but go ahead. What did Trump say that you were talking about?
Well, this is a interview. It's one of Greg Sargent's transcripts for his podcast.
Not Greg
Trump
Sargent.
is failing and unpopular. Brutal new polls confirm it. As new national polls show Trump's approval tanking, a leading analyst explains how the data shows that Trump is in much worse shape politically than is commonly admitted, and details why this matters for 2026. You have known me long enough to know that one of my favorite recurrent rants is how the media treated George W. Bush as, quote, the popular president,
yes,
quote, way after he stopped being popular.
Yes. Well, he once had numbers that were stratospheric because 9/11, and I guess so. People are just like, well, that's just always
from that point, he just went steadily downhill.
Well, there was really nowhere to go.
It's almost a straight line. It's pretty amazing.
Right. Trump would think
no
he
recovery.
Could go up to, I have 1,500% approval.
And then Katrina came, and Bush was like really in the tank when he left.
True.
And
and he was just
some
never
recovery because post presidents tend to be more popular than they were at the time that they left. But the media refuses to acknowledge, they just have this built-in thing about the presidency that you have to treat the president with respect, regardless of how much disrespect the president treats you and everybody else.
Yes.
And you have to treat them as if they're serious, even when they're unserious. And you have to treat them as if they're popular, even when they're unpopular. It's, as news media who's supposed to report the truth without fear or favor, it isn't a question of being fair. It's unfair to keep this from the public. And so I think it's really important to note when presidents, in fact, do become unpopular. So,
all right.
Greg Sargent is talking with Lakshaya Jain, one of my favorite analysts.
Oh, yeah.
From Split Ticket. What if we told you that Donald Trump is a really unpopular president? Would that surprise you?
You?
Certainly not something you hear much in the media. Just like you don't hear about the fact that grocery prices are all-time high. You heard it every single hour with Biden.
We're only just now learning what groceries are.
Yet in the last few days, 5 big national polls have come out showing Trump's approval numbers in terrible shape. This is even more visible on specific issues. On many of them, he's polling in the 30s. He's underwater on his supposedly strongest issue of immigration.
Yes.
In fact, that's not his strongest issue. His strongest issue is securing the border, which he often does, in fact, break even.
Right. Yeah, you separated those issues for us before.
So they say, on top of that, of his most dramatic moments recently seem to have flopped.
Yeah.
From the effort to fire comedian Jimmy Kimmel, Kimmel's back on the air, to the indictment of former FBI Director Jim Comey, People quit the FBI rather than do a perp walk with Comey. I don't know if you
Another
heard that.
weekend thing, right? Yeah.
Like Shia Jain, the co-founder of the data firm Split Ticket and head of political data at The Argument. That's a blog or a magazine.
No, it isn't. All right.
Or
go on.
yes, it is. Has been making the case that Trump isn't actually in such a strong position right now politically. So we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with some numbers.
Okay.
The new Quinnipiac poll has Trump's approval at an abysmal 38, while 54% disapprove. The AP poll has him at 39, 60% disapproving. Gallup has him at 40 to 56. Reuters has him at 41. And the Economist YouGov poll has him at 39.56. These are bad numbers. What's your reading of these findings? And I'm going to read them to you, but I think he's going to say, yeah, these are bad numbers.
It's a good prediction.
I could be wrong, but that's what I suspect. And he says, in fact, they're horrible.
There you go.
And this is as bad as I can remember it being for a first-year president. It's a second term, but it's still the period in time at which the president's approval ratings are generally at their highest. Biden was much higher than this.
Yeah.
Trump is at levels that have only been approached by one president, and that's Trump 1.0.
Level, like he likes to say, levels never seen before except for when it was me, I guess.
That's the only historical comparable. But what's interesting to me, if I may, is that the disapproval this time is of a completely different nature, and I would argue far more damaging. It was centered around his abuse of the office the first time, and people thinking he was unfit to lead the country, but people like the economy. His economic numbers were consistent because Obama left the country with a good economy.
Yeah.
His economic numbers were consistently positive or break even the first time around. This time, people hate Trump for not the abuse of office, but they hate him for the economy. Let me say that again. They hate Trump for the economy.
Yeah, that's supposed to be just automatically the strong suit of a Republican.
Right, but it's also a BFD if you're trying to, get the country to rally around
if you're
you,
into
and you
the
can't
economy
because they hate
stupid,
you.
Right?
It's
the economy.
Well, let's talk about some economic numbers, said Greg Sargent, because if you drill down in these polls, they look even more gruesome. Quinnipiac has Trump on the economy 39.56. On trade, he's 39.54. AP has Trump on the economy 37 to 62. And on trade, 36 to 63. What a lot of people haven't really gotten in their heads is how bad the tariffs are for Trump. Can you talk about how that stew is developed? And Jane says, well, he's getting much more of what he wanted, and people are getting much more of what he wanted, and that's important, and they all hate it, because the thing is the American people elected Trump because they felt Biden was at fault for inflation, and they thought that Biden was unfit to lead, and Trump would do a better job stewarding the economy. And this time around, they think he's been obsessed with things like the woke culture wars.
Well, he is.
Which he has. About persecuting his political opponents, which he has. That's basically what they're saying is President Miller's doing a poor job of the economy. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
That's me saying that, but that's what they're saying.
Okay.
And when people say the American people don't care about all these things that elites think they do, that goes both ways, right? Like the Democratic championing of norms has not worked out for them, and that's true. But it's also true that Trump trying to focus all his efforts on prosecuting his political opponents doesn't poll well. They're like, why are you focused on that? My bills are so high.
Yeah.
And he's only, borderline underwater with immigration. So usually when people see a president being super active and doing big things, they don't like it. And this is one of the most counterintuitive but robust findings in American politics. The more people see a president doing things, the more upset they get. Because unless you're in a Great Depression, people don't want to rock the boat. And with Biden, the question is he fit to lead? And the economy was bad. But this time around with Trump, the issue is he's out there pushing for things that were never really, truly popular. He's doing it in a public way. He's dominating the news headlines, and people do not like it. We've always said when Trump is in the news, he does poorly. He does best when he disappears.
True. Yeah, I feel better when he disappears, and that's true. And I think people get fatigued about it, even without analyzing what it is they're seeing him do. They're just like, the president should be just background information. He's making sure everything is running smoothly. Stop intervening in things, dragging people out of their homes. Bad for.
But he's a narcissist, and he cannot stop himself from being the center of attention. So
crazy.
Now we have this game changer. It's going to interrupt everything. And people are going to pay attention to this instead. I'm not talking about, do you remember Charlie Kirk? I don't.
I heard about that guy once.
Sahil Kapoor summarizing what's going on here. Who do Americans blame for the shutdown? Washington Post, 47% blame Trump, and the GOP, 30% blame Democrats. Marist, 38% blame GOP, 27% blame Democrats. New York Times Siena, 26% blame Trump GOP, 19% blame Democrats. Morning Consult, 45% blame GOP, 32% blame Democrats.
It's always more
them.
These
are all taken between late September and October 1st. And so, they're quoting the old Donald Trump saying, a shutdown means the president is weak.
Well, there's that. And you could even quote the older one, which is, if there's a shutdown, Republicans did it, which has been the case since 1995.
Right. And that's baked in. Just like it doesn't matter what the story is on crime, Republicans are better on crime. It doesn't matter what's going on with the economy or immigration. The Republicans are slightly better on these things. Democrats always do better on individual rights, like abortion. Democrats always do better on health care. It doesn't matter what the proposal is. It's just the way it is. It's baked into the American public. Adam Carlson pollster, recovering pollster, is now a new pollster, has its own firm. Reasons Republicans are losing the shutdown blame battle thus far. 1, only 22% of their own party's buying the health care for illegal immigrants argument. Remember, they're making the argument that Democrats only want to shut the government down because they want to give health care to illegal immigrants.
Yes, they just
only 22% of their own party buys that bullshit.
Well, it's dumb.
Trump's also making light of the situation. He had an AI with Hakeem Jeffries in a sombrero you referred to, tweeting around AI-generated stuff, which makes him look foolish and, making fun of the fact that it's shutting down. It doesn't bother me. Too bad for you. But most importantly, and this comes from Kaiser Family Foundation polling, KFF, 70 to 80% of the country support extending ACA subsidies. And by the way, Republican messaging sucks. Here is a Republican influencer, a former House staffer named Kurt Couchman, who says, wait a minute.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, what?
Republicans are losing the shutdown because a Democrat-only passed subsidy, ARP 2021/IRA 2022, those referred to bills, I suppose, to hide the spiraling cost of excessive regulation from a Democrat-only passed law, PPACA/ACERA 2010, is sunsetting just like you voted for. You think that's why they're winning the argument?
Yeah, I followed
Adam Carlson has said, this messaging sucks. What are you even talking about?
That is bad news. I've seen them make a better distilled version of the argument, but I've also seen it dismantled in real time. I forget which guy.
Well, it's not true, but that's not the point. The point is that's messaging.
Oh, I mean, pee poo pa pa.
Who are you, Al Gore, arguing with George Bush about something I can't even remember at a debate that Saturday Night Live
what happened
made fun of? Is that what you're talking
about? They
here?
understood that. No, but the better distilled version of it was delivered this morning by I forget, the guy that looks like the energy vampire from What We Do in the Shadows, but whose real name I can't remember, but who's on TV all the time, smiling and lying, is saying, well, Democrats are shutting down the government because of the expiration of these ACA subsidies, and I think everybody can kind of follow that part of it. But they designed these things to go away. So once the Democrats said, we want these subsidies to go away, and now they're saying they don't. And
that's because Joe Manchin wouldn't let anything else happen, and not a single Republican voted to do it. So that doesn't work.
So they had to use, just like everything else. And it was good to see some TV hosts pointing this out. I wish I had it in front of me. I could credit the people. I'll get it. But yes, saying what you're saying here is that they used reconciliation to do this, and they basically said we can only do this for a limited period of time. But the hope is that if we can put it in place for 10 years, people will enjoy the benefits of it and not want it to go away.
And that, in fact, is exactly what happened.
Yes. Exactly. True. Just as planned. And as she pointed out, this is also how your Republican tax cuts work. You put them in place for 10 years by reconciliation, and you hope they become popular enough that you can renew them and make them permanent later on, even when they're not popular.
None of that matters.
Yeah.
None of it matters. This is all process arguments, and process arguments always fail. And the point that I think really needs to be made, and this is my article of the day. I thought this was fantastic. I love reading Jonathan Last, who is a conservative with a Republican mindset, who's anti-Trump, and sometimes looks at the Democratic Party with fresh eyes and say, guys, what are you doing? And here is his version of here's how Trump loses the shutdown.
All right.
And then adds, God help us, but Gavin Newsom is the only Democrat who understands power.
Oh, okay.
And if this is too long and you don't want to listen, let me make it really easy.
I see.
Democrats have to stop futzing about policy. And certainly these stupid policy arguments the Republicans making aren't working. Well, you did Law 178, HR Res, and, you shouldn't. Well, none of that matters.
Okay.
What he says. So far as I can tell, the Democratic ask on the shutdown negotiation boils down to preserve ACA subsidies for low-income people that will keep health care premiums lower and undo Republican cuts to Medicaid in order to preserve health care access, especially in poor rural areas, which, by the way, are Republican areas. Fine as it goes, but basically what he says is, look, guys, this is political malpractice. Democrats have Trump over a barrel. The government is shut down. Real world impacts are going to hit soon. And the Democrats' proposal is save Trump from the political cost of the shutdown by saving him from the political cost of his bill. Are you fucking kidding me?
Hey.
He says, expiring ACA subsidies and Medicaid cuts are the two best things Democrats have going for them. Let people suffer. Blame it on Republicans. Democrats are negotiating about policy, and they need to be negotiating about power. If I were Chuck Schumer, my position would be, remember, he's a Republican at heart. The only thing that gets you Democratic votes is statehood for the District of Columbia. That's it.
All right.
It's about power. It's not about policy. Do things like Republicans are doing with redistricting. That's how you do this. Once you have power, then you can worry about policy. But you guys are worrying about policy when you have no power. It's stupid. Stop doing it. Go after power.
All right.
He says if that's too militant for you, there's other things you can do. For example, you want to demand something, demand a legislative end to Kavanaugh stops. End qualified immunity for federal law enforcement officers. Mandate that federal law enforcement officers cannot wear masks. Close the emergency loopholes the administration has claimed for everything from tariffs to acts of war. Remove the Secretary of State's discretionary powers to revoke visas. Or, my personal favorite, release the Epstein files.
That's still powerful.
That's right. We'll bail out Republican incompetence after you release the Epstein files. All of them. Democratic compromise at this moment should not be about making voters' lives better. Voters ask for Trump, let them have Trump. This is the old H.L. Mencken, voters vote for democracy and they deserve it, good and hard. The goal should be to either force Trump to accede to some limits on his abuse of power, inflict political harm on Trump so as to make defeating him a free and fair election more likely, and that strikes me as so obvious, I don't even know what the counter argument would be.
No. Well, I don't know either.
By the way, while you're at it and you got some free time, work on Project 2029.
Yes, people are doing that. They are working on it. And,
right. So I thought it was a really intriguing column because too often people do worry about policy. That's the problem with legislators.
Well, we're supposed to.
Who make the stupid argument that you can't do this because PPACA HCERA 2010 is sunsetting and whose fault is who cares?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You can't open the government until you do some stuff we want. And the stuff we want is to make the playing field a little bit more level.
Okay.
That's who we want. That's where the D.C. demand comes in.
Yes. All right. Well, I mean, that's a
hardball.
real one that people want to have. You usually don't have the Republicans saying, by the way, you should be asking for this. So, yeah. All right. It's a good point. Well taken. We'll mix it up with a couple other ones and see what falls out the other side.
Yep. More bad polling numbers on Trump's handling of high prices of the economy. This is from CBS News over the weekend.
Boo,
Trump administration's focus on lowering prices is 75% not enough, 20% the right amount, 5% say it's too much.
What?
Those 5% have to be like from Turkey and Russia answering that question.
I guess so.
Trump's policies are making you financially worse off, 51, the same 32, better off 17. Now, that one I know. That's a used car salesman from the Midwest.
Okay. That one guy.
The lowering prices question's a loaded question designed to elicit a negative response, say the complainers. Well, no, it's actually a real-life question based on what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
G. Elliott Morris has a different take on polling, and he looks at Trump's popularity, not relative to Trump and the other presidents. We know it's the lowest, but rather about people around the world. And he points out Trump is polling right now on a par with Hungary's Orbán, who may be on his way out.
Oh, I didn't realize
Orbán
that.
is 42, Trump is 42, relatively
Okay.
speaking. Erdogan is 40. Maduro in Venezuela is 29. Don't look at Trump compared to Putin. Putin's at 88 because you know how things work in Russia.
Yes, right. I mean, he's always going to be at 88, I guess.
In Russia, polling doesn't poll you. You poll Russia. You poll polling is what happens.
Right.
El Salvador, Bukele is 87. Modi in India is 75. But the Erdogan, and Maduro are not particularly popular, and Trump is down with that crew. To put it lightly, this is not the portrait of an indomitable president with the public on his side, and the president certainly does not have the unprecedented mandate of the people he claimed he had in November 2024.
Right.
But it's obvious Trump sees himself as a leader closer to the popular authoritarians, except, he's closer to the unpopular authoritarians. Now, Trump is racing against time, trying to consolidate power before his unpopularity renders his coalition too small to accomplish much and his demands for fealty ineffective. And basically, his theme is that all presidents are at the peak of their popularity now. He also mentions failing on Kimmel, where a late-night comedian can successfully defy the president.
Yeah.
When that comedian's parent company feels sufficiently emboldened by public response to defy the president, despite threats of regulatory pressure, that means his power is in question. The autocratic veneer begins to chip away, and that's why Trump is racing against time, because presidents start popular, then become unpopular. George W. Bush was the most dramatic for reasons, but still it happens to most presidents. Happened to Biden in a slow way, happened to Obama in a slow way. And so that being the case, Trump is trying to push some stuff now that he can't. Now the judges are starting to defy him. And so, this is perhaps the low water mark for America. We'll see.
Okay. Well, yeah, we will see. Well, I mean, I guess water can always get a little lower.
Here's another example of things going south for Trump. This is from Salon magazine over the weekend. Trump's Commerce Secretary creates a big Epstein mess.
Oh, yes.
Howard Lutnick called Epstein the greatest blackmailer ever.
I'm the greatest blackmailer ever. What are you talking about? Was that the problem?
Well, part of the problem is that there is an attempt by the White House to maintain a unified narrative on Jeffrey Epstein, which includes the fact that there's nothing here. There's no client list. Nobody is worried about Donald Trump being on that. It's nonsense. It's a Democratic hoax. You can't do that if your cabinet secretary is saying, oh, yeah, there's a list. And Epstein is the greatest blackmailer because he's using that list to get what he wants.
Oh.
Wait a minute. That's not what you said.
Oh. Yeah. Huh. That's wrong. Or, I mean, for the terms of their narrative.
I mean, that breaks apart. That separates, by the way, Adelita Grijalve hasn't been seated yet, so that discharge petition is still sitting there. And there's only so much that Mike Johnson can do. And now that the government is shut down, people are starting to point out that part of the reason the government shut down is you closed the house down so you couldn't do any negotiation.
Right.
And you did that so you wouldn't release the Epstein files. Where's Grijalva and what are the workarounds to get her in there? And okay, fine. Maybe you're waiting till the 12th because that's the day it's certified back in her home state of Arizona.
Though I
but
understand
it doesn't matter. On the 13th, she's ready to sign. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know much longer. There's not much to do in the way of workaround. If they're just not going to convene the House. I mean,
it's just that it makes it so obvious as to what he's doing. It loses its I'm lying about it.
And it makes for Epstein stories. And thanks Howard Lutnick for continuing it. I guess that's why they're so mad at him.
Lutnick's interview presented a significant narrative jolt because it came from inside the Trump orbit and directly conflicted with the administration's public claims. Describing Epstein as gross, Lutnick told the interviewer about the first time he claims to have visited his neighbor's home. He lived next to Epstein. I say to him, massage tables in the middle of your house? How often do you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets like weirdly close to me and says, and the right kind of massage. They get a massage. That's what his MO was, the secretary said, how Epstein catered to his wealthy friends. Get a massage. And what happened in that massage is on video. So what happened to those videos? Why is there now such a dearth of information when Donald Trump's people are running the FBI and DOJ? That's what he said. That's not the message Trump wants.
No?
I assume way back when they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence. How could he get 18 months and be able to go to his office during the day and have visitors and stuff? That has to have been a trade.
It's a good question.
It's a sweetheart deal.
Yeah.
And so this is not what Trump wanted to talk about, and that's not what he wants out there.
I did not know that. Well, yeah, it's I don't know what possessed him to do it. I guess these guys don't really pay attention to what they're supposed to be. Are they just not? They're not big memo readers, I guess. So I don't know. I'm glad he went and did that stupid thing and kept it in the news. We were gonna, talk about it anyway, but it's always nice to have a nice hook for that. I don't know. Okay, a little bit weird, but time for us to pack it in for the day, I guess. I know the contractors are waiting to get in there. It's time.
Well, I'm out of material, so that's really the important
Well, and there's also that. We could have gone on for hours because Trump gave a long and rambling speech in public, and it was recorded, and everybody knows how dumb it was now. So there's lots of clips that we can share. I'll see if I can engineer one up and play it on the other side, but you'll likely have heard it. Did you know that he predicted the whole Osama bin Laden thing in the 90s? He didn't. All right, we didn't either. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess I was hoping to see if we could fit this in while Greg was still here, but I don't know if it has really true value for Greg to play him video of, here's Donald Trump. Did you know he was really out of it and kind of stupid? No, thanks for telling me. So, I didn't need Greg necessarily to listen on this one, but anyway, Trump gave a public speech yesterday, which means that there's 45 minutes of several different clips of him saying things that make you say the president should be removed from office because he's clearly insane. Whether it's, I think certain cities have been burned to the ground for the 15th time, or, I live on the moon, or what, it could be anything. I think maybe there were 10, 20 different clips that Aaron Rupar, for instance, circulated yesterday. So the occasion yesterday was a 250th anniversary type celebration for the United States Navy, which is important and we love it. Yay. Whatever. Right? So he went to Norfolk, Virginia, the naval base, and they put a bunch of, people in uniform behind him. And they did a pretty good job understanding what the task was there. They stood there and smiled. They clapped for a couple of things. Trump would say some things that are definitely huge violations of constitutional prohibitions, and they didn't clap very much, but there was a little bit of smiling going on anyway. So he wanted the background of sailors behind him. By the way, of course, had to have the obligatory video of him dancing to YMCA surrounded by sailors. Take it as you might. he has a signature dance move that people say, you see, you're doing with the fact that it's, I can't even explain to you why you shouldn't be doing this. But there were any number of terrible, terrible things, including some gigantic, as I said, gigantic constitutional no-nos, like standing in front of members of the active duty armed forces and saying, we got to get rid of the Democrats in this country. They're a huge problem, and I need your help eliminating them. Like, you can't do that. And yet he did. But I guess the one that got me in terms of, oh no, he's really losing his mind again. I'm trying to piece this one together. I'll listen to it again along with you, trying to piece together what he might have meant by this one, but it seems like it's just not doable. So here's one segment of the crazy speech. It's about a minute. Let's roll it and see what happens.
To be politically correct anymore. And history will never forget that it was the SEALs who stormed the compound at Osama bin Laden and put a bullet in his head.
Yeah, very nice kind of thing to say, of course. History will never forget that. That's good. SEALs, that's Navy, so he's doing Navy pep talk. And they'll never forget the SEALs at Osama bin Laden's. He realizes, I don't remember the name of the city, and what is it, like Abbottabad? I don't even know either, but yeah. But anyway, at Osama bin Laden's place, his house, and they put a bullet in his head, and there's more. Don't wait a second. I mean, so far that's actually correct.
Remember that. And please remember, I wrote about Osama bin Laden exactly 1 year ago, 1 year before he blew up the World Trade Center. And I said,
now, he blew up the World Trade Center more than a year ago. That's interesting. So this was interesting, too, him mixing his words up and blah, blah. Please remember, I wrote about Osama bin Laden exactly 1 year ago. Who cares? He'd been dead for 10 years when you wrote about him. Oh, no. What I meant was, I wrote about Osama bin Laden 1 year before 9/11. No. Not only no, but he's like, by the way, he says, please remember that I did it. Listen to this. Listen to him remembering.
You got to watch Osama bin Laden, and the fake news would never let me get away with that statement unless it was true. But I said 1 year before to Pete Hegseth, I said 1 year before, where's Pete? In the book, I wrote, whatever the hell the title, I can't tell you.
All right, please remember, history will remember. Please remember, they never remember. I wrote it in a book. My book. I wrote it. I don't remember what the hell the title was. Whatever it was, because of my great memory. I mean, I know this is like lessening the impact of the thing to do the play-by-play. But okay. So again, now I did it a year ago. I did it a year before 9/11, and I called Pete Hegseth and I told him this. And is he saying I called Pete Hegseth in 2000? He shouldn't be, because Pete Hegseth was a college student in 2000. So I called you a year ago and I told you, remember, Pete, when I wrote a book and it was a year before 9/11? No, I don't remember any of that. What are you talking about? So it's a mixed. Time has no meaning for him. But anyway, there you have it. There's more. His claim is that he wrote a book prior to 9/11 in which he told everybody, watch out for this Osama bin Laden guy. Now, it's not that it's impossible, because, of course, prior to 9/11, there were intelligence operatives all over the United States government who were, in fact, watching Osama bin Laden. Because although it's true that most Americans probably had no idea who Osama bin Laden was until after 9/11, it was true that he had been, interviewed on 60 Minutes, and that he had been a menace to the United States for a very long time. Of course, people who remember the longer history of Osama bin Laden know that one of the reasons that he was in fact known to American intelligence operatives was kind of ironic, that at some point we had in fact supplied his mujahideen foreign fighters that he was recruiting from around the Muslim world to fight against the Russians in Afghanistan. And then the Russians leave Afghanistan, and, we're stuck with these armed and I guess now battle-hardened soldiers with nothing to do but hate everybody who wants to have any influence over their home country, and that would include us. And it became a giant terrorism problem, and it became Al-Qaeda, et cetera, et cetera. So it was not that nobody was watching Osama bin Laden. It's that teenage beauty pageant dressing room invader guy wasn't paying any attention to this. He was getting himself in Playboy magazine and cameo roles in the Home Alone movies, and there was no chance he was, just as a sideline monitoring international terrorism. But now the claim is, but I predicted it. We got to watch out for that guy. And they didn't listen to me, and that's why there's 9/11 and something. I want some credit. We'll roll a little bit more of this.
But I can tell you there's a page in there devoted to the fact that I saw somebody named Osama bin Laden, and I didn't like it, and you got to take care of him. They didn't do it. A year later, he blew up the World Trade Center.
So there you go. I want credit. I can't tell you what book it is or what page it is. I wrote it, but I can't tell you anything. But I don't even know the name of the book. But there's a page dedicated to the fact that I saw somebody named Osama bin Laden. Where did you see somebody named Osama bin Laden? Where does he see everybody? On television. And I didn't like it. And who cares? You were a nobody at the time, in terms of foreign policy or whatever, national security policy. I saw him on television. I didn't like it. And I said, you got to take care of him, except he didn't say it or write it or tell anybody. And there you go. That's history, everybody. Thank you. Give me some credit.
We got to take a little credit because nobody else is going to give it to me. You know, right. The old story?
No.
They don't give you credit, just take it yourself.
That's not an old story.
And it was the U.S. Navy that dumped his wretched corpse off the decks of the Carl Vinson to sink into the dark abyss.
Yes. There you go. So that was him returning to the prepared text that was on the teleprompter in front of him. Something Stephen Milligan, his wretched corpse. But let me ad-lib a little bit. You remember when I predicted 9/11 and then I didn't tell anybody, and then everybody died, and I said I have the tallest building. Yeah, I don't know. That was one of the loopiest of the segments of the speech. And there are plenty more, and you could do the whole show just about that, but then we would not be caught up with all of the rest of the news that's out there in the world. All right, what other things do I have to tell you? I'm going to have to run through them, sort of speed run a little bit. Politico has something. I'm just going to go reverse order of where I parked them. Are they the most important? No. It's just the order I parked them in. Politico letting us know, just in case you were wondering, like, I had my eye on Osama bin Laden. My hobby was keeping an eye on American national security. Well, for whatever reason, then they, what are we talking about? So, well, for the second time around, 25 years later, I finally got them to make me president again so that I would be in charge again of national security. And then, for some reason, I did this thing which Politico reports as Trump has sat for only 12, quote, daily intelligence briefings since taking office. You remember what the big rap was, of course, on missing 9/11 for George W. Bush. We didn't read the presidential daily briefing. It was more of a historical document, says Condoleezza Rice. You remember all of that stuff. Blast from the past, right? So the rap against the administration at the time was you missed the warning of 9/11. I didn't. I said a year ago, before anybody knew, that I'd seen something somewhere. I saw a guy, and I didn't like it. And it was 25 years in the making that it would matter that I saw a guy and didn't like it, and we would do something. But now the United States government finally works the way I always thought it would. I say I don't like something, and we kill it. Anyway, the whole rap on missing 9/11, as he didn't do, he saw it coming, was, that the president at the time didn't go to the daily intelligence briefings. Of course, he becomes president. What does he do? Fixes the problem. I also don't listen to intelligence briefings. So there you go. The scarcity of the president's daily briefings comes as he pursues high-stakes diplomacy with America's friends and foes. I think you should also point out, probably in the headline and subheader, not done here in the Politico's piece. The scarcity comes as he pursues low-stakes culture war stuff every day and says, we got to get rid of the thing that the guy with the place in the drag and his humming a Cracker Barrel, also super important, something. His head is elsewhere. It's an Amy McKinnon story. If you want to know what serious thing is happening here, since President Donald Trump was sworn into office in January, remember that's when it happened, he sat for just 12 presentations from intelligence officials of the president's daily brief. Of course, he's played golf something like, 6 to 10 more times than that, probably. But that's a significant drop compared with Trump's first term in office, because there were significantly fewer brainworms then, and there were still too many. According to a Politico analysis of his public schedule, in much of his first term, Trump met with intel officials twice a week for the briefing. And remember, they dumbed it down. They turned it into pictures. They turned it into Gorilla Channel, whatever. Now he doesn't even sit for that. That's the basics of the story. What could he be getting a daily intelligence briefing about? Oh, I don't know. Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, China, everything that's going on in this country, whatever. Okay. So there you go. Is it worth reading the article? You bet. Do we have time to do it? Maybe. But are we going to move on nonetheless? Yes. Let's see. What other things do I have here put aside? Some of these things, again, are Blue Sky posts, and it takes me a while to catch up on exactly what they were. Oh, yeah. I saved this one because I felt fairly certain, since Greg was on the show, that we would be talking about the New York mayoral race. And we didn't, which is astonishing. Maybe that'll be Wednesday. But now you'll know this ahead of Wednesday. Eric Adams, as you know, dropped out of the race after saying that he wouldn't drop out of the race. That was probably the best indication that he would drop out of the race, and he did. And news comes today via his public schedule that I guess the reason, not really, but now that you could backfill it. Now, what's he doing now that he's dropped out of the race? He's totally dedicating himself to mayoring, right? Yes, sure. What part of New York is he going to be in? I don't know when is this happening? All right, it's Monday. So that's today. Right. So what part of New York is he in? Oh, well, actually, probably he is in New York. He's at the airport, JFK Airport, I presume, because he's on his way to there's a lot of votes here in Albania. Now, the mayor of New York occasionally does make foreign trips, and there is some tenuous connection. Very often, mayors of big cities will make these trips and say it's to promote foreign trade. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. New York City probably among the better bets in terms of actually having some financial relationship with some of these more exotic locations. Albania, I don't know, but it's a good bet that something weird is going on, right? Noah Shachtman just posted this on Blue Sky saying, I'm absolutely positive there's nothing shady whatsoever about Eric Adams making a previously unannounced trip to a totally rando country. And that's kind of where you are from the viewpoint of here in the East Coast of the United States. Albania, it's not unknown. It's just, come on. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess he's low on funds, so he's on his way there. But we didn't talk about the New York City mayoral race today, and that's why that didn't come up. But all right, I gotta flip through a couple more things. There's so much. I think we are. I don't know that we definitely got it right, because it's a very complicated thing, but we're in the neighborhood of up to speed on what's going on in the courts about the National Guard and its use in Portland. It's a little more complicated about its use in Chicago, but I think Greg basically got it right. There was an order not to do it, not to use the Oregon National Guard. Then they tried to circumvent it by trying to use a California National Guard. It's not clear to me that they didn't also try to move Texas National Guard to Portland as well, but I think they're also trying to use them in Chicago. And Greg Abbott seems bound and determined to give away as many of his National Guard troops as he possibly can, which seems like a bad idea on the whole, and is, of course, hypocritical, as NYC Southpaw points out, that there are social media posts from Greg Abbott 10 years and 5 months apart. The first one being offered from April 28th, 2015, in which you may remember this old-time greatest hit. I've ordered the Texas State Guard to monitor Jade Helm 15. Wow, who remembers Jade Helm? To safeguard Texans' constitutional rights, private property, and civil liberties. Remember there, federal and federalized troops present in Texas for exercises, much to the dismay of the governor there at the time. And so something got to organize the local National Guard to make sure that the tyrannical federal government isn't stomping on our civil rights here. But also, of course, now I fully authorize the president to call up 400 members of the Texas National Guard to ensure safety for federal officials, yada, yada. Go ahead, take my people and put them wherever you want. This in reaction to specifically the threat to put them in Chicago, but he's also apparently offering them up for use in Portland as well. So just putting that out there. You'll never believe it, but yeah, Greg Abbott is kind of a hypocrite. All right, so let's see. More speed running on our way through here. I've got some information for you. I guess I should point out that it is unclear at this point with the destruction of the judge's home in South Carolina, just to give you some facts about that one. But it's also unclear, depending on what reporting you're reading, whether or not they are, in fact, local authorities investigating arson. Some people say, well, duh, yeah, and others say, but they haven't actually said that they are investigating it as an arson, but they really, really should. From Time Magazine comes a report on this. This is, just a general background reporter, so we can tell you who was it and where did this happen. House of South Carolina judge criticized by Trump administration burns down. Just to give it some context, the reporter, I'm going to have to work on the pronunciation of this name. Miranda Jeyaretnam is my best guess at the surname. Jaya or Jaya. I'll say J-E-Y, Jeyaretnam. Apologies to you, Miranda. But your reporting is quite clear. Police are investigating the cause of a fire that burned down the home of South Carolina Circuit Court Judge Diane Goodstein, who had reportedly received death threats for weeks related to her work, although, again, that could be from any number of cases that any judge would ordinarily handle. That's just sort of part and parcel of the job, unfortunately. State law enforcement is investigating the house fire. The only question is whether or not they are openly saying we're investigating it as arson. That part is less clear. It is in Edisto Beach, which I think that's the pronunciation for it. I've been nearby in the area. So South Carolinians, for instance, will know instantly exactly what we're talking about. The fire began around 11:30 a.m. on Saturday. Sources told local news outlet FITS News, F-I-T-S News. I don't really know what that's about, but okay, that's a local outlet. Goodstein was reportedly not at home at the time of the fire, but at least 3 members of her family, including her husband, former Democratic State Senator Arnold Goodstein, and their son, have been hospitalized with serious injuries. According to the St. Paul's Fire District, which responded to the scene, the occupants had to be rescued via kayak. So that's what I'd call a beachfront property, right? Law enforcement has not disclosed whether the fire is being investigated as an arson attack. But okay, I don't know why. At this time, we do not know whether the fire was accidental or arson, which suggests that they're investigating to see, but okay. They haven't concluded that it was arson. I mean, I guess if you're going to say it's being investigated as arson, that would mean that they've concluded that it is one. So I don't know. I mean, people are a little bit outraged. Why aren't you investigating it as arson? Well, we're investigating whether or not we think it's arson, and then we can announce, yeah, we're investigating it as arson. Right now, we're investigating whether or not that is a real possibility. And if we can conclude that it was, then we can start. When we say we're investigating it as arson, that means we're like looking for a person. We're not at that point yet. Okay. I don't think they're unnecessarily delaying it. So I don't know. There's a little bit of outrage out there. They're not investigating his arson. Why not? Well, I think they're headed in that direction, and that's what they're telling you. All right. So at this time, we do not know whether the fire was accidental or arson. Until that determination is made, State Law Enforcement Division Chief Mark Keel has alerted local law enforcement to provide extra patrols and security. I mean, the deed's done. I don't know what they're going to get out of that, unless it's one of those they return to the scene of the crime things. Maybe. South Carolina Chief Justice John Kittredge told this to Fitz News, adding that the fire appeared to have been caused by an explosion. The 69-year-old judge had received death threats in the weeks leading up to the fire. Multiple sources told Fitz News last month Goodstein had temporarily blocked the state's election commission from releasing its voter files to the Department of Justice, a decision that was openly criticized by Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, allegedly, Harmeet Dillon, and later reversed by the state Supreme Court. The DOJ, and so, by the way, there's your state Supreme Court for you in South Carolina. Should we release all of this personally identifying information to the DOJ, which is in the clutches of dodgy boys who are accidentally disclosing this information all the time, people who are putting out sensitive information on signal chats, people who are very vindictive and targeting their enemies? Should we hand that over? Your state Supreme Court said, yeah, what are you doing trying to stop the federal government from getting a hold of all this personally identifying information for no reason so they can search for fraud that doesn't exist? Okay. The DOJ had sought the information, including names, addresses, driver's license numbers, and social security numbers. Super important that they have that. For over 3 million registered voters, as part of President Donald Trump's March executive order restricting non-citizens from registering to vote. By the way, non-citizens already not allowed to vote in federal and state elections, so not really necessary. But let's hand out all this dangerous information to irresponsible idiots. That's the state Supreme Court for you. The Trump administration has sought to drastically reshape the election system in the name of election integrity by requesting, in some cases suing, states for voter registration data to compile a comprehensive centralized database. And remember, by the way, all the gun nuts used to say, one thing we definitely don't want the government to have is a centralized comprehensive database of citizens' information. But if you want to give it to this guy, sure, go ahead. The administration has sought data from more than 30 states and is considered pursuing criminal investigations into state elections officials. Critics have argued that the administration's efforts are an attempt at disenfranchising voters from marginalized communities and overstepping states' constitutional authority to control election procedures. And it is all of that, but it's also that we don't trust you with anything, much less stuff that can actually destroy our lives individually, even just by accident. If the fire at the judge's house turns out to be targeted, it may mark the latest incident of a startling rise in political violence in the U.S. And while the Trump administration has blamed the left's rhetoric for inspiring violence, such as the assassination of Charlie Kirk, an attack on a judge would come as the administration has increasingly vilified the judiciary, oddly enough, blasting judges and then blowing up their houses, I guess, that rule against it as USA-hating insurrectionists. Right, true. By the way, at this point, probably, I mean, they discuss political violence being on the rise, and I mean, I guess we ought to put that in there in terms of context. But I want to point out that over the weekend, as I said, weekend President Stephen Miller ranting and raving on social media up to and including when the judge in Oregon, and remember, a Trump-appointed federal judge, said, yeah, actually, you can't use the National Guard this way. Miller just came out and said, he called it, what did he say? His term for it was legal insurrection, that there was an actual insurrection going on led by the judges, and they are defying American the Constitution and federal law and defying properly vested federal powers, and we have to do something about this, and we got to put a stop to it, et cetera, et cetera. That's just part of the context that we're working in here and why you want to ask whether maybe is this arson. Political violence on the rise, you know about that. In addition to Kirk's murder last month, the murder of the Democratic Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives, Melissa Hortman, and her husband in June, and an arson attack at Democratic Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence in April. In addition to all of that, a number of judges who have ruled against Trump have also received attacks and threats from his supporters. Chief Judge for the District of Rhode Island, Jack McConnell, told NPR in August that his court has received more than 400 threatening voicemails. Greg told you earlier in the show that one of the Reagan-appointed judges cited in his response to one of the Trump administration lawsuits, here's a copy of the postcard threat I got from one of your lunatics already. So, it's kind of everywhere, and the fact that it's happening to judges everywhere is relevant to this too. All right. Well, there was more. McConnell, the chief judge from Rhode Island, has issued a ruling blocking Trump's freeze on federal aid earlier this year. Judges told NPR they've received unsolicited anonymous pizza deliveries. I know that doesn't sound very threatening, but that's their way of letting you know we know where you live. It's a tactic, in fact, widespread tactic, known as pizza doxing that implies the sender knows the judge's addresses, and it sometimes burns those addresses to the ground, unlike Portland. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just leaving myself a note to try and find Stephen Miller's comments about what is and isn't legal insurrection. But, all right, we'll see if we can find that piece. Back, though, to Time Magazine for the time being. But, so the mention of the tactic, and it's important to know that. I mean, it does sound like a not very threatening thing. Well, I sent a pizza to your house. Like in some cases, ordinarily, I'd be like, wow, a pizza, this is great. But yeah, it's meant to be it's meant to send a threat. We know where you live. And as dumb as it sounds, it's very widespread, and it is very frequently followed up by other threats, and in some cases, burning your house down. And so it's kind of important. A White House spokesperson told NPR that attacks on public officials have no place in our society, noting the president's own experience with assassination attempts last year. Well, okay. I'm hearing everywhere that judges are worried about their own safety. There are people who are inflamed by the incendiary comments of our president and the weekend president, and I would add, members of Congress about judges. Public officials have legitimized attacks on judges with whom they disagree. Nancy Gertner, a former judge and current professor of practice at Harvard, told The Guardian in May. That month, Richard Durbin, top Democrat in the Senate Judiciary Committee, we know him as Dick Durbin, of course, penned a letter, strongly worded, I'm sure, to Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel requesting an investigation into pizza doxing incidents against at least a dozen judges. That's why they're so worried about it. This keeps happening over and over again, sometimes followed up by violence. Threats against judges are threats against constitutional government, the letter said. Everyone should be taking this seriously. That wasn't Durbin's letter. That was New York Judge Richard Sullivan, a Trump first-term appointee, speaking to the Associated Press in March. This is a basic authoritarian instinct, Stephen Levitsky, a political scientist at Harvard University and co-author of How Democracies Die, told the AP. That's not a textbook on killing democracy, though. You cannot have a democracy where the elected government can do... we cannot have a democracy where the elected government can do whatever it wants. And that's kind of poorly put. You should have... I mean, it can't just do anything. It feels like it has to, follow the law. But most people actually, under normal circumstances, you say, well, a democratically elected government can do what it wants. I mean, they were elected to do that. Well, yeah, but they do things legally. Yes. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. I wasn't thinking in terms of murdering opponents. I should have thought of that. Trump administration's targeting of judges is specifically addressed next. Less than a year into his second presidential term, Trump has asserted an expansive view of his executive powers, to say it mildly. As of October, Trump has issued over 300 orders, proclamations, and memoranda, many of which have resulted in thorny and protracted legal battles because they're baseless. But between May 1st and June 23rd, it's a very short segment of all of this time, federal district courts blocked Trump's actions with temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions around 94% of the time, right? So sometimes when Trump complains, this or that circuit court, usually complaining about the Ninth Circuit Court out in the West Coast, it's reversed by the Supreme Court. It's the worst record, like 54% of the time it gets reversed. You're getting reversed 94% of the time. But anyway, that's coming to an end too, by the way, as the Supreme Court says, well, we'll reverse the reversal. We just won't tell you why. Tell you next year. Critics have said that the sheer amount of litigation, some of which has been brought or appealed by the Trump administration, could overwhelm the judiciary. I'll look to Steve Vladeck for discussion of that. What President Trump has done, perhaps more than other presidents, has been to not only bring the test cases and force the courts to deal with these issues, but to do it in a shock and awe strategy, which puts additional stress on the courts. Stephen Richman, chair of the IBA Bar Issues Commission, told podcast Global Insight, speaking in a personal capacity, though, test cases are one thing, but as in any litigation involving parties and lawyers on both sides, the facts and positions taken must satisfy rules of professional ethics in terms of not being frivolous. Others have said the bigger threat comes from Trump officials attacking judges that rule against the administration. Trump and his allies have also sought to portray the judiciary and their decisions as politicized and, quote, judicial overreach. That's the problem that we thought we would be addressing. But good point along the way here and saying, by the way, even without physically threatening the safety of judges who rule against you or who might potentially rule against you, there is, of course, this fire hose, DDoS essentially attack on the federal judiciary. Just flood it with garbage so that it just can't keep up. That's an attack on the judiciary itself, too. Hours before the fire at Goodstein's house, Trump's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, accused U.S. District Judge Karen Immergut, now I don't have to look it up because it's in the Time magazine thing, of, quote, legal insurrection for granting a restraining order. Oh, not that. That blocks Trump's deployment of the Oregon National Guard in Portland. California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, said in a post from his office that Miller's accusation for ruling on a case isn't just reckless, it's authoritarian propaganda, plain and simple. Miller has previously accused Democrats of using incendiary language to, quote, mark people for political violence. And, of course, every Republican accusation being a confession, you know that Miller's incendiary language is also marking people for political violence. Trump has called specific judges who have pushed back on his executive orders radical left lunatic and troublemaker and agitator. In May, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the panel of judges that ruled against Trump's sweeping tariffs activist judges. In a post that month, Miller said, "We are living under judicial tyranny." Miller posted on X in March, under the precedents now being established by radical rogue judges, a district court in Hawaii could enjoin troop movements in Iraq. Judges have no authority to administer the executive branch, sure they do, or to nullify the results of a national election, which they didn't do. Another day, another judge unilaterally deciding policy for the whole country, like Kaczmarek used to do all the time. This time to benefit foreign gang members. Republican Chuck Grassley, who should know better, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, posted in March after a Washington judge temporarily barred Trump from carrying out mass deportations. If the Supreme Court or Congress doesn't fix it, we're heading towards a constitutional crisis. In April, Attorney General Pam Bondi called a swath of lawsuits filed against the White House actions a constitutional crisis. President Trump's executive authority has been undermined since the first hours of his presidency by an endless barrage of injunctions designed to halt his agenda, she said in June. Again, another confession from Republicans. Speaker Mike Johnson asserted congressional authority over U.S. courts and appeared in March to threaten to disempower district courts if it came down to it. We do have the authority over the federal courts, as you know. We can eliminate an entire district court, Johnson said. We have the power of funding over these courts and all other things, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and Congress is going to act. But will it, since you're not going to bring it into session to act? I've noticed that. And, of course, there's this thing about the Senate, and you don't seem to be able to control them. All right, well, there's much more to this article. Well, we're getting toward the end of it, but I think you get the gist of it. I just kind of wanted to lay that out there. Plus, it did me the favor of verifying Weekend President Miller's angry rant about, quote-unquote, legal insurrection. So, all right, moving along through things in reverse order here. I do have something for you from Steve Vladeck, just to get down into the nitty-gritty and I guess the weeds, about courts and domestic use of the military. In response to adverse judicial rulings, the president's advisors and supporters are claiming courts lack the power to halt domestic use of the military. And here a little history lesson of some interest. A critical early precedent is to the contrary, he wrote just yesterday. Had to work over the weekend, as many people did. He says, I wanted to put out a quick issue this morning in light of Judge Karen Immergut's remarkable ruling yesterday, even before she reconvened the court at 10 p.m., I'll point out, granting a temporary restraining order against Trump's federalization of members of the Oregon National Guard to quell the, quote, violence in, quote, war-ravaged Portland. That ruling has prompted a slew of claims this morning from the president's advisors and outside supporters that federal courts in general lack the power to halt domestic deployments of the military. I don't know. It seems weird. Like we have laws against domestic deployment of the military, and who interprets laws? Judges do. So what the hell are you talking about? And yet there they are saying so. Before this claim makes it too far, it seems worth helping to educate folks about a key early precedent that, in my view, cuts entirely in the other direction. And it provides powerful evidence to those who care about such things that the founding era understanding not only tolerated a robust judicial role in such cases, and to make it even clearer, tolerated a robust judicial role in cases about the domestic deployment of the military, but not only did they tolerate it, for a time they actually required one. Required what? Required judicial role in cases about domestic deployment of the military. Yes. That's not to say Judge Immergut's specific analysis in this case is correct, although I'm sympathetic. It's to say that there is nothing categorically inappropriate, which is the claim here, about federal courts reviewing and, where necessary, halting domestic uses of the military while they are ongoing. Remember that the complaint before was some judge in Hawaii could stop troop maneuvers in Iraq. No, that's not the claim. It is that domestic use of the military, about which we have a great body of law, which would be interpreted by judges. What are you talking about? But in case you didn't believe that there was ever, the founders would never have. They made the president commander-in-chief. The founders would never have given the judges a role in use of the military. No, not foreign use of the military. Domestic use of the military, yes. They never would have. What if not only would they have, what if they did? What would we say about something like that? Well, Indeed, it would be striking if it were otherwise, as he puts out. The modern-day Insurrection Act traces its lineage all the way back to a statute Congress enacted on May 2nd, 1792. That sounds pretty originalist and authentic, don't you think? Which has been referred to as the Calling Forth Act or the First Militia Act. That statute was designed to carry into effect the Constitution's grant of power to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. By the way, why are they claiming, Republicans and Trump administration, why do they claim the right to mobilize or federalize the National Guard? They always claim it is to execute the laws of the Union, or even to suppress insurrection, or perhaps repel invasions. They keep saying immigration is an invasion. They make all of these three claims, right? So again, what about that part you're forgetting about where the power to do this is in the hands of Congress? Oh, we don't care. Just like we only read half of the Second Amendment, and we've nullified 10 other things in the Constitution when necessary. The idea was that Congress would identify the circumstances in which the military power could be used domestically. That was a huge issue and sort of central to the whole American Revolution, right? And would thence delegate that power to the president. If Congress says there's an insurrection here, they'll allow the president to use the military domestically. Currently, though, this president says, I don't care what anybody says. Congress or no Congress, I'm going to do it. Maybe that's problematic. As Justice Robert Jackson would remind us in his concurring opinion in Youngstown some years later, the clause's limitation on command power, written at a time when the militia, rather than the standing army, was contemplated as the military weapon of the Republic, underscores the Constitution's policy that Congress, not the executive, should control utilization of the war power as an instrument of domestic policy. But how exactly should that delegation work? The question was the subject of a rich debate in the Second Congress. What are we in, the 119th? And the Second Congress, one that culminated with the 1792 statute. I've summarized that debate elsewhere, he says, and he links to it. For present purposes, the key point is that Congress's principal concern was not with the last two circumstances in which it was to delegate power to the president, that would be suppressing insurrections or repelling invasions, but rather with the first circumstance, to execute the laws of the Union. Oh, they're burning Portland to the ground. We need to protect federal property. That's executing the laws of the Union. And the way Congress addressed its concerns was to delegate the authority to use the military, but with meaningful procedural checks. And then he says, here is the full text of Section 2 of the Act, an image first of a screen cap of a page reproducing the text, and a block quote second with the key provisions highlighted. And here's you can only have to really read it once. Whenever the laws of the United States shall be opposed or the execution thereof obstructed in any state, by combinations too powerful to be suppressed by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings, or by the powers vested in the marshals by this act. In other words, if the judges and local law enforcement can't put down this obstruction of the execution of federal law, then the same being notified to the President of the United States. In other words, you tell him, look, the judges can't stop him, the marshals can't tell him, Mr. President, this is what's happening. Well, the same being notified to the President of the United States by an associate justice of the Supreme Court or the district judge, it shall be lawful for the President of the United States to call forth the militia of such state to suppress the combinations and to cause the laws to be duly executed. So just for getting this correct and into modern language and contextualized for Oregon, if local law enforcement and federal marshals on the ground in that area too can't handle it themselves. If the president gets notified by an associate justice of the Supreme Court or a district judge, then, of that being the case, then the president can call forth the militia of such state, Oregon's militia, to suppress such combinations, whoever is violating all the law. Well, the district judge says, I'll tell you what, I've reviewed the situation. I do not find that to be the case. I will not notify the President of the United States that the ordinary course of judicial proceedings with the powers vested in the marshals is unsuccessful in maintaining order and the execution of federal law here, because that's not happening. It's not being burned to the ground. There isn't an insurrection happening. Sorry, that's a no. Well, that is weird. And so guess what you can't do? You can't mobilize the militia of such state, this state, Oregon, and use it. Well, it doesn't say we can't mobilize the militia of another state. No, but also this is a constitution of enumerated powers. Show me in the Constitution, as you're always saying, where it says you can mobilize the militia of another state to that. Even you can go outside the Constitution and look for statutory authority. There's probably not, I don't know, but probably nothing out there that says, oh yeah, you can totally just move National Guard around state to state. If the local militia don't, if conditions don't meet the requirements for you to use the local militia, you can just import militia from elsewhere. Probably not. Now, and if the militia of a state, back to the statute, if the militia of a state where such combinations may happen shall refuse or be insufficient to suppress the same, it shall be lawful for the president, if the legislature of the United States be not in session, to call forth and employ such members or such number of the militia of any other state or states most convenient thereto, as may be necessary. So there's the opportunity to use some other state, right? And the use of the militia, so to be called forth, may be continued if necessary until the expiration of 30 days after the commencement of the ensuing session. So as soon as Congress comes back in, 30 days later, they've got to approve what's going on. Of course, it's some question about whether or not they're in session or not. The House isn't in session, but the Senate is. So are they in session? I don't know. We don't have to get to that part just yet, but at least there's contemplation of the use of another state's militia, which didn't look like that was going to develop, but it did. But again, this was all contingent on what? You don't even get to the ability to use a different state's militia until and unless the local militia refuses, but they've got to refuse a situation where they're being validly called up. A judge, I guess they could try this. Give me an associate justice of the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. Tell me that that Portland's burning down. He would absolutely go ahead and comply with that. Should it be taken at face value against the word of a Trump-appointed judge on the ground in Oregon? No, but I guess you could still claim it. But they haven't done it yet. So there's no basis for calling forth the militia yet, and no basis to complain that judges have never should have contemplated such a role, because in 1792 they did. Now, that law is gone. That's true. That's something to argue about, at least. But the idea that the founders would never have allowed judges to stand in the way of domestic use of the militia, sure they did. It's on paper. Here it is. Steve continues here to give you the analysis. In other words, unlike Section 1, which dealt with insurrections and invasions, Section 2 imposed two procedural requirements on the domestic use of the military to carry out the laws of the Union. A district judge or Supreme Court justice had to make the requisite factual findings before the president could do anything. And if out-of-state militia were used, there was a baked-in sunset. Even though the Congress that enacted the 1792 Act was full of folks who were either at the Constitutional Convention and helped to draft that document, or who were central in the ratification debates, my research found no evidence that members made constitutional objections to the judicial review that Section 2 required. And President Washington, in putting down the Whiskey Rebellion 2 years later, followed the statute's mandates to the letter, obtaining the requisite judicial determination from Supreme Court Justice James Wilson first. By the way, Wilson, one of the 6 people to sign both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, but he obtained James Wilson's determination before he sent troops to Western Pennsylvania to restore order. George Washington said, I got to ask a judge first. No founder would ever have. What about George Washington? What about James Wilson, who signed everything there was to sign in those days? The 1792 Act was written as a temporary experiment. Congress decided to delegate comparable authority on a permanent basis to the president in 1795. So yes, they changed the law. Important. But if the point is the founders would never have contemplated it, sure they did. Did the founders repeal it? They changed it, yeah. So that's a good argument. You could do that one, but they weren't smart enough to make that argument yet. Anyway, and alas, he says, they removed the ex ante judicial review requirement in 1795. But there was no suggestion at the time, and I'm unaware of any since, that the provision was eliminated for constitutional reasons, as opposed to Congress's broader, if alas myopic, view that the checks weren't needed in light of how responsibly President Washington had behaved during the Whiskey Rebellion. Thus, although there are later examples of courts issuing injunctions against domestic uses of the military, Youngstown itself stands out as a fairly prominent example. The relevant point for present purposes is that there was no founding era aversion to a robust judicial role in these cases. The first statute Congress ever enacted on the subject required such a role, and there was no contemporaneous suggestion that the Constitution forbade it. That's the current argument. Of course not. It doesn't. I am, as regular readers of this newsletter know, likely know, no great fan of originalism as a conclusive methodological approach to constitutional interpretation. Thus, the way that I tend to think about these things, the existence of the judicial review provision in the Calling Forth Act of 1792 is useful evidence of how the Constitution was understood at the time, but nothing more. Rather, the argument for judicial review being available to halt, where necessary, unlawful domestic uses of the military rests on a lot more, in my view, than what some folks believed more than 230 years ago. But for those who ascribe to the view that we are today bound by how the Constitution was understood then, I do not see how one can reconcile the 1792 precedent with any claim that prospective judicial review is categorically precluded when it comes to the domestic use of the military. And given current and recent events, such review of anything seems more important than ever, whatever its outcome. So how do you like that for a little bit of a history lesson? I know it's a little bit hairy and a little bit confusing, and confusing as its precedential value, given that it was replaced a few years later with a law that no longer required ex ante judicial approval. But, as a debate tactic, it definitely takes apart that nonsense about the founders would never have allowed, they'd roll over in their graves if they thought yada, yada. No, not true. Okay, let's see. What else have I got that I can fit into the works here before we play our outro music? Who even knows? Oh, there's the one that Greg covered about Howard Lutnick and raging Trump officials on Jeffrey Epstein. That was kind of funny. Let's see. Maybe I think there's something up top here that we might have skipped over at some point. And we didn't read this piece from Heather Cox Richardson, which we'll not be able to get through before we have to outro ourselves into music, but a good summary of some of the things that happened over the weekend. Hopefully it'll rope in something that I may have forgotten at this point. But She wrote just yesterday on Friday, the Minnesota Star Tribune reported a conversation on the messaging app. This is the thing I forgot. Signal. There's a second Signal gate going on, essentially. This time, Signal app communications between one of Stephen Miller's top deputies, Anthony Salisbury, and a senior advisor to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Patrick Weaver. Stephen Miller is the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, of course. You know exactly who he is. Salisbury was in Minnesota to attend a funeral. His Signal chat at the time, clearly visible to bystanders, one of whom, by the way, provided images of it, took pictures of a screen. To the Minnesota Star Tribune, the two men were discussing a plan to deploy, if you thought it was too much to send the Oregon National Guard, plans to deploy the 82nd Airborne Division of the United States Army to Portland. Since World War I, the elite 82nd Airborne has specialized in parachute assaults into hostile areas. Perfect for Portland, I'm sure. But Trump has apparently not yet signed off on the plan, but they're just freely discussing it anyway on a Signal app for everybody to see, which is kind of weird, and also how they handled Yemen, and also the true story, I think, of the first Signal gate. But there you go. Once again, weekend President Miller in the center of, yeah, why don't you go ahead and say the president thinks it's okay, eventually. Wow. Well, Weaver told Salisbury that Hegseth wanted Trump to give him a clear order to send troops into Portland. Between you and I think Pete just wants top cover from the boss if anything goes sideways with the troops there, which isn't a bad approach to something as dumb as that, I guess. As Adam Gabbett of The Guardian reported, Weaver said Hegseth preferred to send in a National Guard owing to potential backlash over using the famous 82nd. The 82nd is like our top-tier quick reaction force for abroad, Weaver wrote, so it'll cause a lot of headlines, probably why he wants POTUS to tell him to do it. This conversation raises the question of how involved Trump is in the decisions of his administration and the ones they're making about the use of the military. On September 29th, Hugo Lowell of The Guardian reported that Miller had taken the lead in the administration's strikes on the boats in the Caribbean. Vessels the administration claims are Venezuelan drug boats, although it has offered no evidence either to lawmakers or the public for that claim. At this point, I'll just add once again that it looked for all the world like the first Signal gate was really all about Miller being the one to say, I'm pretty sure the president said this was a go, so why don't you go for it?
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
By the way, credit where credit is due. Heather Cox Richardson does get to that in the very next paragraph, saying, as I heard it, right, the president was clear, green light, and the attack in Yemen was on. I haven't seen anybody tie that together. I mean, it was fairly obvious, so kudos to her for doing so, and kudos to Justice Putnam for taking the ball and running with it next. We'll see you tomorrow.